He may have been a major player in the pages of Marvel Comics for over half a century, but it was only recently that Captain America became the poster boy for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The quintessential hero, it's almost impossible to imagine what kind of fight would force Steve to turn against his fellow Avengers. But you might be surprised to find out the comic book history of the squeaky clean star-spangled Boy Scout is as dark as they come. And if fans of comic book movies think their superhero blockbusters are getting a little too dark, violent, or serious, they'd better hope these famous moments from Captain America's history are never adapted. But they're still stories every fan should know, so we've made them the focus of our latest docu series, The Shockingly Dark History of Captain America. The original Captain America. Looking back now, it makes perfect sense for Cap to have made his debut in a solo comic punching out Adolf Hitler on the front cover. But remember, the first comic was released in 1941, a full year before the United States even entered World War II. So to a large part of the American public who weren't looking to go to war with Germany, the star-spangled hero made his debut knocking a foreign head of state unconscious. The move proved controversial, since the world didn't know just what Hitler's Third Reich was up to. But it didn't stop Timely Comics, the original publishers of Captain America, since the comics that followed were huge successes, showing Cap knocking out Nazis of all shapes and sizes. The stories inside the comics were a bit different, but remember, Steve Rogers and his sidekick Bucky Barnes were American soldiers first. So while DC's Batman stopped at snapping criminals' necks, Cap and Bucky were wiping out Nazi soldiers one grenade at a time. It was war, sure, but that didn't stop Marvel from rewriting history years later to keep Cap's killing to a minimum. Captain America Goes to Hell. Things got weird with Captain America almost immediately. Once the war came to an end, the writers had to find a new purpose for Cap, and had serious trouble doing it. After just 70 issues, Cap and his famous enemy Red Skull had fought in so many strange places, there was just one left to go: Hell. Descending into the underworld in Captain America's Weird Tales and forced to kill Red Skull or remain there for good, Cap came through, unsure if it was all a dream or completely real. Not surprising, it was the final issue that Steve Rogers would appear in before joining plenty of his fellow superheroes on the shelf as an Avenger. Captain America, Commie Smasher. It wasn't long before a new political crisis seemed perfect for Captain America, the Red Menace, also known as communism spreading around the globe. The paranoia of the 1950s is usually remembered as a mistake, and Captain America shows why. Returning as, quote, Captain America Commie Smasher, there was no actual threat or enemy for Cap to fight, so weird Soviet monsters or Southeast Asian villains were created in the hopes they could drum up the same patriotic excitement as a decade before. They didn't, and the obvious racism and bigotry in Cap and Bucky battling people based on their politics or ethnicity seemed to prove that his time had passed, or a new mission was needed, at the very least. Captain America, the Murderer. We know what you're thinking. If Steve Rogers was frozen in the 1940s, how could he have been smashing commies a decade later? That's a question that Stan Lee ignored completely, even though he wrote the stories in question. In 1964, Lee locked Cap's origin in for good, having been frozen and thought out by the Avengers years later. It was here that Steve Rogers' super soldier procedure was completely fleshed out, with Lee confirming one detail that seems pretty important in hindsight: that German spy who murdered the brilliant scientist behind Steve's super soldier serum. Steve killed him almost immediately, brutally beating him and throwing him into running machinery. But don't worry, things are about to get even stranger for Cap fans. Captain America versus Captain America. It wasn't until the 1970s that Marvel finally explained the plot hole of Cap operating in the 1950s. But instead of wiping them out of continuity, they took an even crazier path. The Cap of the 1950s was actually an imposter, having undergone plastic surgery to look the part, and injecting himself and his sidekick with a reverse-engineered serum that was slowly driving them both insane. Not weird enough? The imposter, now the villain known as the Grand Director, hatched a plan that saw him pose as Steve Rogers, leading a wave of neo-Nazis in Harlem, splattering a swastika across his famous shield. Daredevil eventually helped save the day, but things for the hero were only going to get weirder and darker. Captain America Quits. As the Watergate scandal and Richard Nixon's resignation were going on in real life, it only made sense for Captain America to reflect the loss of faith in government, with some comic book flair, of course. In the comics, Cap fought a secret empire conspiracy of his own, eventually catching its leader to realize, well, it was basically Richard Nixon. Not dark enough? Okay, the implied president shot himself to death in the next panel. As disillusioned as millions of Americans, Cap turned in his uniform for good. Well, for a few weeks at least. Captain America quits, again. The Civil War story wasn't the first time that Cap was asked to become an official operative of the government, and the first time his choice was simple, deciding he represented the American people, not the military or government. Steve Rogers resigned, with the authorities turning to an unlikely replacement, John Walker, previously known as the Super Patriot, a former enemy of Cap's. More aggressive, more racially intolerant, and less heroic, Walker even picked one of his immigrant-hating sidekicks as his new Bucky. But he eventually proved he really wasn't cut out for such a heroic role, when he beat a supervillain to death with his bare hands.
I'm sure if he still made weapons, Stark would be neck deep.
Wait, hold on. How is this now about me?
I'm sorry, isn't everything?
Civil War and the death of Captain America. The Civil War between Cap and Iron Man playing out on film is a bit different than in the comics, when Steve and Tony Stark were split on a major political issue. Where Tony figured every superhuman would give up their privacy, Steve saw it as the government overstepping their rights. The bloody battle that followed answered the question of who would win, but Cap ended up surrendering anyway. He even faced his charges and sentence willingly, but never got to serve them, receiving a stomach full of bullets on the steps of the courthouse. It's as good and dark a death as any superhero could hope for, but just like the others, it didn't last long. So what do you think? Should any of these dark chapters in Captain America's history be brought to the big screen? Or are they better left forgotten? Are there any dark stories of your favorite superheroes that have these ones beat? Let us know in the comments, and remember to subscribe to our channel for more videos like this one.